Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's program, Museum in Motion. My name is Oscar Eveling, Education Manager at the Wilsonian, FIU, and I'm very happy to be joined by our special guest tonight, artist Leo Castañeda and digital curator Youssef Murray. Um, Before beginning with some introductions, I'd like to kind of just note a few things for our webinar tonight. So on the bottom hand section, you'll notice a Q&A feature. So we encourage you to use this to submit your questions throughout the program. And towards the end of the hour, we'll look to kind of follow up with any questions. In today's presentation, we'll be going through a range of media, techniques, and projects from Leo, which we'll look to break down and explain. But there's any kind of extra clarification, feel free to let us know and we'll look to kind of break it down a little more. To give you just a sense of the overview for tonight's program, after introductions, Leo will kind of share more on early influences in his practice and how he's kind of arrived at his Heroes and Villains project, and just the thinking that went into the commission for the Wilsonian. That being part of the Art of Illumination project, a space where artists interpret the content of our museum and bring it out to the facade of the building. And so to that end, we do want to acknowledge the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and the Night Arts Challenge Grant, which provides this opportunity. We'll then transition into conversation with Youssef and get more detail on this project, wrapping up with some Q&A. And with that, a little more on our guests. Leo Castañeda is an artist living in Miami, Florida. Fusing gaming, painting, virtual reality, drawing, and interactive sculpture, Castañeda's work probes how the language and structures of video games intersect with the world at large. Through open mythologies built across feedback loops between analog and digital, Castañeda's work reimagines the corporeal, ecological, and sociopolitical anatomies that govern our cultural operating systems. Castañeda received his BFA from Cooper Union and MFA at Hunter College. Residencies include Soma, Mexico City, attended through Cisneros Foundation, Of Games 3 at Koj International, New Delhi, India, the Bronx Museum's AIM program, and Ulite Arts Studio residency. In 2019, the Wilsonian FIU commissioned Castañeda to create a video animation, which we'll talk about tonight. He's also a recipient of South Florida Cultural Consortium Visual Media Arts Fellowship, Locust Project's Wavemaker Grant, and Ulite Arts Ellie's Creator Award. After 2 years as a professor of 3D animation at FIU, Castañeda currently teaches 3D animation at New World School of the Arts in Miami, Florida. On towards Youssef. Youssef Murhi is a curator, researcher, and artist specialized in digital art. He holds a master's in interactive telecommunications from New York University and has lectured at numerous academic institutions for the past 25 years. Youssef is the curator of digital collections at the Wilsonian. He has been leading the development and implementation of digital technologies. Prior to joining the Wilsonian, Murhi worked at Columbia University and curated exhibitions for MoCA, Los Angeles, the American Society, New York, the Esther Klein Art Gallery, Science Center in Philadelphia, White Box in New York, and Canal, Caracas, where he curated the first solo exhibition of Elias Crispin, whose work is currently featured in the permanent collection of the Louvre Museum. And with that, Leo, please let's begin this journey into these worlds. Leo, would you mind just unmuting? Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Youssef. And thanks to the Wilsonian for having me. And thanks to whoever's here. All I see is my computer screen, so it looks like I'm speaking to two people. But yeah, so let's begin. So last year, towards the end of the year, I was asked by the Wilsonian to look at their collection and basically create an animation from that. And I'm just going to show a really quick clip, and then yeah, so this is going to be a little preview. You might have seen this image already, but so yeah, that's basically mini mini preview of what is to come. But one thing that was interesting when Yusuf brought me along to do the presentation is that he really wanted me to talk about like more biographical situations, or like how I grew up, things that usually I don't really tell that many people. But so yeah, so basically had a very wonderful childhood, I would say, overall, because I grew up in Cali, Colombia, and in a time that I didn't really know what was going on sociopolitically in the area, but I had wonderful parents and a wonderful family that were also artists and architects. So here you can see my mom and my sister and me as in our earlier times. And here we are in the current times. So we're in different cities right now. My mom is in Cali, Colombia. My dad is in Orlando. My sister's in New York. But we meet once a week for Zoom talks, as many of you, I assume, also meet. And we share our work with each other. So here's my mom sharing some fashion designs. These are some drawings of my mom when she was young. Like, she was always drawing different characters and different fashion designs. These are some more contemporary drawings from her. These like very eclectic outfits. Yeah, almost like sculptural outfits. So basically, I grew up around these kind of images. Here's my dad's work, current work. He works as an architect in his day job, but is creating these digital abstractions. In his, he finds a lot of spare time. It's amazing how much he works. So I recently even taught him a little bit of how to use Unreal Engine, one of the digital platforms that I use, and he started creating his own virtual galleries. And these are some of the works that my dad was doing when, shortly before I was born. He did the series of 99 monsters or creatures, like these like humanoid abstractions. Yeah, when I was little, my dad would show me Wilfredo Lam or Roberto Mata's work frequently, which are definite influences. Here's my sister. She is just graduated fashion design from FIT New York, and you can see clear similarities across different generations. She abstracts the figure, works a lot with symbols, and these are some of her fashion drawings. That's the work that she did physically. That was her thesis show. And then here's my grandmother. She is a painter originally from the Amazon. Her name is Maria Teresa Negreiros. And she does these abstractions of the Amazon. So these like almost like cinematic abstractions. Here's the forest fire from the Amazon. Here's my little sister with her in one of her exhibitions. These are earlier works from the 1960s before she was focused on the Amazon, that were more like conceptual, like minimalist sculptures with photography embedded. And she had a lot of different series, and this is another one called The Angels that was mixing indigenous doll figures from the Amazon called Caraja with more like colonial representations of angels into these kind of alienish hybrids. And finally, the other artist that was the most influential as a family figure was Hernando Tejada. He wasn't directly related in blood, but he was my grandpa's friend from his childhood, and we would always see each other until he passed away when I was 9. And his work was super whimsical, like also very interactive. So yeah, like this sculpture here would actually play music. Well, if you press the right button, or here's a chair as a sculpture. Some figures with this odd object. So yeah, so that was kind of like the context that I grew up in. I thought it was normal, but after more time, I realized that it was a very privileged situation to just grow up around these different generations of artists. But what I was really focused on was video games and anime. So when I was 7, I got my first 6 or 7, my first video game console, which was just like a Genesis. And here I found some old sketchbooks recently, so here's some drawings of Sonic the Hedgehog from around age 7, which was highly influential for me in the way that one would move through different spaces. These are some other video games that I grew up with: Prince of Persia, Super Mario 64. I'm sure many of you also grew up with them because they're global media. I found this drawing of from Zelda Majora's Mask that I did at age 12 as fan art. So early childhood, I did a lot of fan art obsessively, as many students that I've had also had. So people all over the world end up like drawing these characters from comic books and anime. So here's a anime that was huge in Latin America, Caballeros del Zodiaco, or Knights of the Zodiac / Saint Seiya. Some drawings from when I was little. Dragon Ball Z. I would watch an episode every day in 7th grade and basically almost like act out the episode with sounds, just like being like, yeah, like very intuitive, just into whatever situations were happening there, like supernatural situations. Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I started watching when I was 13 and had like a next level of complexity when it came to anime. And this one's more like a funny story, but like another hero of mine while I was growing up in Colombia was Antanas Mocus, just because I thought he was really funny and cool. He was a mayor of Bogota that would dress up like a super citizen. So I did a whole series of him like exploring and going to the Olympics and stuff. So anyways, it was like another kind of hero that was more of the real world. And then I found this self-portrait at age 13 of when I started finally like creating my own worlds or like characters. So this is just a sci-fi self-portrait. Then here I'm going to show a little bit of high school things. When I was in high school, we were highly encouraged to do maybe some of the things on the left, like more like technical paintings to then get into college. But my sketchbooks were just filled with like flying motorcycles and spaceships, and here's like some scuba gear, like just like different sci-fi armors, different stuff like that. And then I would do my regular art on the side. And then I went to New York to Cooper Union, which is where some of these works are from. And the decision ended up being that for a while I really wanted to go to Art Center College of Design, which is to study entertainment design, which is to draw for movies and video games. But I had like a change of heart right before that. I thought maybe it would be interesting to, like, if I was so into this concept art and like illustration, that maybe I could gain a lot more by going to Cooper Union and learning more about the concepts in art. So these are some of the early works while I was there. I ended up kind of getting into like an artist block through some of these works, but this one in particular I called the Red versus Blue. It was just like a red side and a blue side, like almost in a Dragon Ball anime kind of way, meets abstraction, just shooting beams of energy through paint at each other. But in the end, it ended up being a conceptual dead end, as many of these works were. So that's what led to what I'm currently working on, which I started while I was still at Cooper towards the end, which is basically trying to find a solution that would lead to endless freedom of creation within art, and to be able to merge all of my interests, like the growth that I would have done and my experience in New York and in college conceptually with what I learned technically in college and high school, with the energy that I had as a child of just like constantly drawing characters and worlds from these anime and video games, plus I guess the family aesthetic legacy that it falls more into the subconscious, or things that I would have been influenced by growing up in Colombia in a more subconscious way. So my thought was that maybe I could uh, follow the structures and language of video games, where you basically have this like sequence of spaces called levels, and a sequence of gatekeepers, or called many times called bosses, almost like this corporate ladder meets mythological structure, where you can jump around different worlds almost without like any sense of what the rationale is between each world, that they're basically arranged numerically. So I thought that that structure of numerical progression could lead to then figure out like various aesthetics without limitation. So these are some of those images that I started with. So here's the first level, which was kind of getting Super Mario principle, where you could jump on a cloud and navigate a space with yeah, almost like Hollywood explosions. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe the 2001 Space Odyssey monolith as a head is a black hole at the center of the space. So that's what led to what this first boss would be. I'm going to run through some of these quickly so I could get more into the current works so we don't spend too much time. But these are some other levels. Many of them just were ideas that just came to mind the day of. So it was really thinking of trusting intuition, or trusting whatever an initial idea would be, and then creating connections after. So this is just like a stack of soundproofing material as a space. Here's just like a large building with some walls and a striated landscape. This boss was based off of the Sagrada Familia Cathedral, that was like this omnipotent space where something could be holy and almost like dangerous or ominous at the same time. Anyways, I'm gonna keep running through these quickly, but then I started doing subsections of the levels, or different events that could happen in the levels. Many times video games have this, where there's like a large division and then subsections, much like the way a city is organized. You have Miami-Dade County and then the different municipalities within. So, and that could be something that then relates to also the progression structure within the game. And then when I was finishing Cooper Union, I also started thinking of like the interaction aspects of games and how to make a connection with art. So this is the first interactive sculpture that I made. This is called the Final Boss, where you could put your hands in it and like basically see yourself through this little rectangular opening that would kind of show the image of the self. And these are some other experiments soon after I graduated college, with the kind of like thinking of the same thematics and where they could lead to. I found a lot of similarities between the structure of video games and opera and theater. So I was thinking like maybe the culmination of all this work could end up being a theater piece or an opera, where operas have a lot of this like progression of through like mythological structures or stories between different gods encountering each other. So I did a few experiments of that, just like making like a shoddy costume. Like my sewing skills are really bad, so things that would be good to photograph from far away, or here is just like going into After Effects and animating what this could look like. Yeah, it was a bad economic time, so none of my roommates and I had jobs. So with the shoddy costume. I once went to Union Square in New York and just drew people and had them reflected on the helmet of the boss. But yeah, but in the end, something felt it was missing. Like maybe the culmination of the series wouldn't necessarily be a theater piece or a performance, but maybe a game itself, like a game that would reflect the structures of games. So in 2011, a friend of mine, Victor Ochoa, started a indie publishing company, and he challenged me to do a comic book based on the first level, all the paintings that I had arranged on the first level, and that was the first time that I was challenged with coming up with a narrative. And in the end, it also was a good excuse to almost come up with concept art for this video game that I would do one day, when I would have the 3D animation or programming techniques available. But for now, all I could do was draw and use Photoshop. So that's how this came about. Then I ended up going to Hunter to my MFA, which was a good excuse to have a really awesome studio and feedback from professors and a whole other community in New York. And over there, I started teaching myself how to use the 3D technology, first with the program Unity and Mudbox, and following YouTube tutorials. So here's the first sculpture using virtual reality that I made. Like I wanted to find a way to not just have a floating headset in a gallery space, and to have this almost like mythological computer. So I just got my desk and put a bunch of objects there and kind of built this representation of what would be the first boss, that kind of monolith with a mound that could become liquid, solid, or gas. But here it's just a silver fabric. These are some other early representations of early experiments using Unity and 3D modeling. All one could do there was navigate the space as a floating camera. I made this poster for the sculpture, almost like an advertisement, relating the words boss more to like corporate bosses, and almost like this strange alien mythological object that's like grabbing this what we many times think of a traditional boss, which is just this person in a suit and basically asking the viewer to become this boss. Okay, and I'm gonna speed along through some more interactive sculptures. This one would ride almost like a motorcycle to access virtual reality. This ended my MFA program, and then that led to moving back to Miami, where I realized that I was not that great at building things, and I could use the virtual programs to create my own spaces and my own designs for all of these. So here are some images of these showrooms for objects for viewing virtual reality. Here I made a more portable version of a virtual reality sculpture that would just be a wearable. My sister helped me sew it. These are some paintings that came from this process of almost creating a feedback loop between digital and analog. I also did digital and handmade collages during this time, just trying to figure out, just learning the techniques of digital to analog to digital to analog. And then in 2017, 2018, I felt like I was a little bit more versed in the 3D program, so that's when I started building out the spaces for the video game, and then building out like what would be the different interactions that would happen. Here's a 2-year jump, but I'm currently working on like the demo prototype of the game, and it has different spaces. And this was actually one where I collaborated with my grandmother to design some of the visuals. And these are some more current images of how the game looks like. This is the sixth boss based off this 2009 drawing of these floating orbs in a space. So, yeah, a lot of like abstract entities and abstract ways of interacting. Here's an image of just some of the interaction models that I'm playing around with, where one could intensify actions such as a touch becoming a punch, or an observation into a landscape becoming an assimilation, so that one gains the like camouflage or like a skin from the landscape, which leads to some of the skin designs. Like I've been doing a lot of designs of what different characters could be in the game. This one is consciously and subconsciously influenced by biology, Evangelion, and also the Karaja figures from the Amazon. Yeah, here's another view of some of these spaces with the camouflage situation on. These are some drawings that I was doing last year and continue to do this year obsessively, just figuring out like what different characters from this game will be, or like different player armors, skins, etc., or like different ways of creating the self. And this is a quick trailer that I did a couple of years ago. Or like our good visual. Yeah, a lot of the sectors in that place are through scans of paintings, photographs, look at this image here. The first level into the reflection video games and movies too. Yeah, as a way to build a series. Okay, I'm showing this image here because last year another thing that I was hugely focused on or interested by was the inventories of games, like what like what armors does one keep, like what objects does one collect, like is there an infinite inventory, is there a limited inventory, does one just hold the things that are in one's body, does one have a huge warehouse where one stores things, like all those aspects could really inform the way like a game's play structure, but also like conceptual framework works, and also like moral framework. So anyways, this is, for example, No Man's Sky, like the way the inventory works. I did this piece at Light Arts. They allowed me to do this large wallpaper that I called inventory stage selection, like thinking what are the parts in between inventories and stage selections. And and finally, like I've been designing what hopefully could be some future exhibitions where it's merging all these mediums. Like you have like video game booths where you can play the game, but then there's also like VR sculptures, COVID pending, because maybe it's not that, it's a little bit of a super spreader event, so maybe we'll have to rethink those sculptures. But yeah, basically like all media in constant loops where one becomes the character of the game, one plays the characters of the game, the aesthetics of those characters end up informing furniture and end up informing like all these different things where one doesn't know where things end and where things begin. And yeah, so that leads to basically where my mind was at when I began the Wolfsonian project, that I called live inventory, because there was a lot in between the inventories of games, and also like the inventories of a museum, and and as you'll see in some images, even more things that related to the way the building and where the Wolfsonian is. Yeah, more things that are related to that space. So the process was that Yusuf, who you met earlier, asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said yes. And then he guided me into the museum and showed me, told me about the history of the building, showed me different key works, and this was the first visit. And after that, I just did some sketches here on the right, basically of key objects that resonated with me and key aspects of the space that resonated with me. Here are just some images of, yeah, some people in the space rolling up some carpets. The building had many kinds of objects stored in it, from cars to artworks to different objects. It was once a gallery. It was basically a space where tons of different objects of different kinds of value, or like different kinds of value from which is arbitrary, would come in. This is basically how that exhibit was first laid out. Like all the objects were in storage, and the images of the objects were there to represent them. So most of the objects that were going to be in this exhibit, the exhibit is still running. It's called The Universe of Things. It was also an exhibit to catalog Nicky Wolfson's collection, like basically see different through lines throughout throughout time of the works that he's collected that are now a part of the museum. Yeah, these are some of the shelves at the Wolfsonian. So also like the behind the scenes of how these objects are held and how they're stored. And but in the end, the main tool of for me to work with was the digital archive. So these are just some images from the digital archive, but it's open to everybody. I don't specifically remember the website name, but if you look up Digital Archive Wolfsonian, there's thousands of images and articles, and yeah, it's incredible. So I started going through the digital archive and also the catalog of images that would be in this exhibition, Universe of Things, and just finding objects that I would resonate with, to basically emulate the way that I started the video game series, where of just trusting intuition and trusting feeling of like what leads to decisions that are arbitrary, and then from there starting to create like a meaning out of the randomness. I was also thinking that it could be interesting to create almost like a sci-fi noir aesthetic. So I looked at a lot of like screenshots of different film noir and sci-fi noir films, such as Legete, which curiously here is also has this display case situation. And then from there, I just started storyboarding like what these different spaces could be and how the objects could be arranged in almost like a mythological, or like a, yeah, like mythological otherworldly storage space. And yeah, from there, I started recreating some of these sculptures in 3D programs. So I'd use Mudbox and Maya to create almost like loose interpretations of some of these sculptures. Also, there were some sculptures that were scanned as well that Yusuf provided to me. So such as the wrestler here, which is at the entrance of the museum. Then I started going into Unreal Engine, which is a video game design program, to start laying out the spaces. The first space that I built was the shelving, like almost like this like abstracted like noir shelf system. And also just a room of just laying down the objects. Like there were a bunch of toys, and then figuring out like what kind of loose or abstract narrative was going to come from them. Here at the bottom are some of the 3D models that Yusuf and FIU provided to me that were done through point cloud scans. So you use like different photos to create a 3D object. Here's some of the kind of like experimental process that I started putting together. Very similar to the way that I work with my own projects. Like here was the image of the sculpture that's in the show. Then here's the sculpture without any textures. I saw this painting that I found really interesting and applied it as a texture. So suddenly it was like the hybrid of these two works came together in that piece. And yeah, and I was also thinking more about the skin part of video game inventories, like these like outfits. Yeah, the vocabulary is very interesting in gaming. That a skin, which in the current world we know is like this thing that has multiple layers and histories. In video games, a skin is just could be an armor or it could be like a completely different aesthetic to what a body is. And I thought of merging some of those principles with the project as well. So kind of like reinfusing some of the characters and mythologies that I was working on in the game, but with like thinking of the Wilsonian objects as potential skins. So here's this scale for weighing oneself, and I applied it as a skin to one of the characters. Here's the character in a space with this lunchbox that transformed from a purse to a lunchbox. So I started animating some of the objects from the Wilsonian, like turning them into each other or adding virtual skeletons to them so that they would animate like start walking, and you'll see in a second when I show the video. And yeah, here are some other images of some of the characters that are derived from the game that I'm working on. But they all have these little rectangles on their heads, almost like these image identifiers. Like many times in video games, we have like these player trackers. I mean, it could be interpreted as many things. It could be like a abstraction of an image or a phone or like the mind. But it's basically these little rectangles that are identifiers. I put some of the Wilsonian images into them. Some I left more like the different colors. In the game, I'm working on them to be different abilities, but still figuring out like what the layers of meaning are. Like it's mostly something that relates to that monolith, the 2001 Space Odyssey monolith from the beginning of the presentation, like almost like creating this lineage between this like supernatural entity and the entities that one controls. So, but here in the case of the Wilsonian video, they all have outfits based on different objects from the Wilsonian. And yeah, and if you haven't seen it, I know we're in a low travel time, but I'm pretty sure it gets displayed nightly throughout this month, along with 2 other videos by other artists, Ezra Wube and a group that Yusuf probably knows the name of that I can't say right now, from 8 p.m. to 10:30, or anyways, Yusuf knows the schedule. And finally, to conclude, I'm going to show the video of what I ended up doing there. It doesn't have any audio because it's meant to be projected on the exterior of the building. But yeah, now you can see, you can understand more of the process. Here are the shelves with the sculptures.
So Leo, these shelves are, where did you take the inspiration to recreate these shelves?
Um, I couldn't find the exact image. Like I searched for it all over my images, but there were shots from shelves that were at the Wolfsonian, well, at the building at the Washington Storage Company. Yeah, sorry, I haven't mentioned the name yet, but like, yeah, where it's multi-decade lifetime, these shelves have gone through, yeah, like thousands or hundreds of objects uh, that were deemed of value to different people, from yeah, from the carpets to the artworks to the cars. And yeah, it was basically just like this place where one stores and displays objects that one deems to have value. And something in the Wilsonian that I thought was very interesting is that it really thinks about that. Like there's objects that are worth thousands or more, like dollars, but there's also objects that were just a piece of paper from a certain historical time, or it really shows one like what how arbitrary all these value structures are, because in the end, to like the world and to nature, like they're all atoms. so uh, so yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Oh, here I animated some of the Wilsonian objects with like humanoid movements, and yeah, that that's
This is a truly wonderful work. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were speaking. I have several questions. I find your work fascinating since the very beginning when I saw one of your pieces at Ulight Arts when it was called the Art Center. I really was intrigued by the aesthetically dazzling attributes of your videos, and I became fascinated as well with your background and all this rich history of how you come to be an artist, which was quite organic. Um, were you conscious at some point about, like, being an artist or studying art, or it was something that just was part of your daily life?
Yeah, the daily life. I think in seventh grade, I wanted to be an architect or something, or maybe in elementary school, maybe like what every kid wants to be, like an astronaut or something. But yeah, my grandma sometimes tells me that we went to visit uh, the house of a family friend, and and then he was showing us like, oh, here's the living room, here's my bedroom, here's the dining room, and then I was like, hey sir, like like maybe at age 4 or 5, like, y tu taller, ¿dónde está tu taller? Like, where's your studio? Like, yeah, it was, yeah, yeah. I mean, I truly, yeah, thought it was just a normal thing that everybody would just have a creative practice to, yeah, and then drawing was just really fun. Like it was just like I would sit in my dad's lap since I was 2 years old, and I'd be like, Batman, and then he would have to draw Batman, and then eventually like I would start drawing Batman.
That's
But
quite amazing.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
what was your impression when you saw the collection at the Wolfsonian, and when you got into the building, into the entrails of the building, and you started looking at these objects with different eyes?
well, one thing, if you see some of these virtual reality interactive sculptures, and even perhaps subconsciously, like some of the artists that I grew up with, like that had interactive sculptures, that I think for a while I was always consciously and subconsciously interested the line between design and art, like what,
Mhm.
yeah, and I think that was what I was really struck by, like different time periods where industrial design and art were almost in the same sphere or in the same object. Like you showed me that Noguchi Zenith.
Yes, the radio by Isamu Noguchi.
It seems that we lost Leo momentarily, so let's
Okay,
just give it a few seconds and see if he comes back on momentarily.
perfect.
Hello.
Yep,
You are
perfect.
back.
Back on.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Thank
For a
you.
second, I was like, Yusuf, you're so still. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just talking about that relationship between design and art and all the hybrid possibilities of the two, like where, yeah, and again, like there's been thousands of years of interest in that, from like like pre-Columbian or like ancient cultures from all over the world that would create objects from in their for their everyday existence that were also artworks, to the Bauhaus, to many of the objects that are in the Wilsonian. There is this kind of like almost like peaks and valleys throughout history where the objects that we deal with every day are also art or also have multiple layers of meaning.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's what struck me the most of the Wilsonian collection.
And how did you came up with your selection? I mean, we provided you um, images, a checklist of objects, 3D scans that were created in collaboration with FIU. I think that was a wonderful way of connecting your commission piece with the university and also with the collection. Um, but how did you decided which works were going to be placed in this animation?
Mm, Again, it was kind of following the through lines of intuition of just like creating meaning out of randomness. So uh, just as much as to a certain extent the way these shelves in the building have created meaning out of randomness. Like at some point someone decided that this object should go there. At some point someone created that object or found that object to have value in a certain way that should lead to that building. It was very much just thinking of okay, like what things intuitively feel good together, and then thinking that like the meaning could then start emerging from these connections or from these different placements of the objects.
Right.
um, yeah
I see that your work has multiple layers, not only because you are
Oops, sorry.
dwelling around the collection, but also the history of the museum when it was a storage company called the Washington Storage Company back in the 1920s until the early 80s. But also you have this sense of dissolution in your work. You are like dissolving all these frontiers between the analog and the digital. You go from painting to installation to performance to video games. How do you apply this concept of dissolution in your work, in your life, in the media that you use?
um, I'm definitely interested in that, where like something could have many like interpretations, or it could be like the most meaningful object possible, but it could also just not mean anything, which I think the universe works that way too. Like in the end, like we're all a continuum of atoms and energy, but then we assign language and structures to things in the world. Like here is a boundary between those two objects, but in the end, we're looking at a bunch of pixels that are connected. Like there's yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. In and that I guess goes back to like the video game structures, the video game structure of progression through different landscapes is very similar to the arbitrary boundaries that we establish in the real world, where we cross a river and it's like one side is America, one side is Mexico, like all the different boundaries that existed before when it was indigenous territory, all the different boundaries that didn't exist before when the dinosaurs and other objects were here, other beings were here. Like I feel like that definitely extends throughout so many aspects of the world that a boundary exists and it also doesn't exist at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Everything is becoming virtual, and we're also virtualizing our relationships, our knowledge of ourselves, and we can become very existential if we start thinking about these questions. I want to thank you, Leo. I think this is a very good moment to say that we thank all the people that are present in this museum in motion tonight. And please submit your questions for Leo using the Q&A feature below.
Leo, Youssef, thank you for that great presentation, just giving us a little bit more kind of the influences that you're bringing into the project, and then just kind of the thinking behind the specific commission. Very much in line with kind of your larger project. A small correction, I guess I mentioned towards the beginning, heroes and villains, but levels and bosses, a little bit of distinction and the ambivalence of our relationship to figures of authority. So just that clarification.
It has a lot to do with it.
But on to questions. I do have a question from Jonathan Stamp. So he says, Leo, it's John. I got a question. As a digital artist, do you find it hard to show work if it's not displayed in video format? For John, he's chosen to go with large G-clay prints for his digital work, but sometimes he's a little lost when it comes to how they should show their work. So any thoughts on that trade-off?
Yeah, I don't think there's a boundary. You can do video and you can do digital prints, and you also show your work through Instagram. And like basically, especially with this digital mediums, like it's hard to know what the final product is because there's like thousands of representations of what this thing could be. Like you can make a drawing from your image. You can just look at it and I don't know, write a performance. Anyways, like there's maybe that's taking it extra, to another extreme. But yeah, I don't think it has to be a video to be exhibited. It's just just following along with iterations of images in whatever medium that one wants to have.
Beautiful. Leo, I'm wondering if you could also just maybe share a little bit on the piece that's right behind you, which I think has another family connection. So just behind you on the wall.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so my parents moved to Orlando recently, like a year and a half ago, and my mom temporarily loaned me one of her mother's paintings. So that's what behind. So yeah, Maria Teresa Negreiros. She was originally, she's originally from the Amazon in Brazil, and she met my grandfather in Rio de Janeiro. And she went to study art, and he went to study architecture. So then that's what led that Brazilian connection into Colombia.
It's fantastic to kind of see how you weave all these influences together, your own kind of family history, your initial interests, right? So back to childhood, what really kind of prompted that creative spark, and getting back in tune with that, right? As you kind of develop your professional projects. So that's great that all those things kind of find their way with each other. Next, I have a question from Coralina. So Coralina's, hello, Coralina. She's wondering if you can talk more about the skins and intersection with your heritage, collaborations with your mother, grandmother. So kind of along what you just kind of referred, but I guess more specifically, how you experience American identity politics manifested within these multi-generational works.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The as of now, the way that I've started developing the skin system is as like camouflage. So basically, in the game, you have different like little rectangles or different heads or masks that give different abilities, and one of them is analysis, which when intensified becomes adaptation or assimilation, which then is the camouflage. So basically, as one travels through different levels, each level has its own visual identity that then allows one to assimilate or not assimilate. So where that has a lot of layers that could lead to the way race works in the world, which I'm really super thinking about is, yeah, like if one is in one's original level, be it level 1 or Columbia or whatever, one is adapted to the space, and then one as an immigrant goes to another location, and then one has elements from one's previous level or one's previous location that then one can choose to, you can choose levels or gradients of assimilation. So, or like another thing that I'm thinking of in the game is like, what if there's an aesthetic of a level that I as a player identify so much with that I choose not to assimilate in the next level. I choose to own the aesthetics of this skin into the other world. So yeah, so it's, I guess it's almost like there are parallels to the way that human skins or outfits or fashion work, but it's also like a creature that's more like a cuttlefish or like an octopus, where the way that it moves through the different spaces and assimilates with the spaces is also like stealth or like an adaptation and just to not be seen. But one thing that I'm working, thanks to Ulay Arts and the Wavemaker grants from Lucas Projects, during the last year I've been able to on and off work with programmers part-time, and currently I'm working with a programmer, Jaime, who's really awesome, and we're constantly talking about like the moral implications of the skin system, from what happens if one gains abilities from the skin system. Like there are some video games where you have a skin or like an armor that gives one super speed or gives one the ability to be more, to move faster through water or resistance to fire. Like there's different elements to that, but then that could also lead to, okay, well, is there a skin that's better than another one? Which then it's almost like creating like hierarchies, or are they balanced between each other where no skin is better than the other one, they're just balanced through different attributes? Or are the skins just cosmetic, like fashion-esque representations that, you know, are just like personal expression where one just chooses intuitively based on aesthetics, and the only differentiation in terms of ability is if a skin gives adaptation to a landscape through camouflage, which is kind of like the way that it works as far as like national identity or something, that you go to the place of your origin and then suddenly you disappear and you're able to like move in So yeah, that's kind of like a long answer to that. But I welcome more feedback to elaborate better.
Well, Leo, I think we're up to the hour now. I think that's a good place to leave things and wrap up for tonight. Again, a big thank you to both you, Yusuf, for joining me tonight, and all of our audience who's tuning in.
Yes, thank you.
Please look at our website for upcoming programs for more virtual offerings. If you have any questions that weren't answered, we didn't have time to get to, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll look to get that answered for you. Again, thank you, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.